Hello guys, how are you? Today I bring you another topic of great importance. Alright, let me ask you a quick question. What do a car manufactured in Mexico, a television assembled in Monterrey, an avocado crossing the border, and an engine component that ends up installed in a truck sold in Texas all have in common? Well, believe it or not, they are all connected by one of the most important economic agreements in modern Mexican history. And yes, we're talking about the free trade agreement between Mexico and the United States, originally known as NAFTA and currently known as USMCA. Now, when people hear words like trade agreement, international treaties, or economic integration, they usually think it's something distant, something only politicians, business executives, or economists understand. But the reality is completely different. Because this agreement directly affects the price of many products you buy, the jobs of millions of people, and even the value of the Mexican peso. And pay attention because this story is much more interesting than it seems. We're not just talking about trade. We're talking about how two economies became so dependent on one another that today it is difficult to imagine a complete separation. But to understand how we got here, we first need to travel a few decades into the past. Because before trade agreements, Mexico was a very different country. For much of the 20th century, Mexico heavily protected its domestic market. Many foreign products faced significant restrictions when entering the country. The idea seemed logical. Protect national industries. Help Mexican companies. Boost local production. But as the years passed, challenges began to appear. International competition was growing. Supply chains were modernizing. And the world was becoming economically integrated at an incredible speed. Mexico realized that remaining isolated could become a disadvantage. And that was when one of the most important negotiations in its history began. Can you imagine changing the way an entire country trades? Because that's exactly what happened in the early 1990s. After years of negotiations, Mexico, the United States, and Canada signed the North American Free Trade Agreement, the famous NAFTA. The main idea was quite simple. Reduce trade barriers. Facilitate exchanges. Allow products, services, and investments to move more freely between the three countries. Sounds simple. But the consequences were enormous. Suddenly, many companies began viewing North America as a single economic region. Factories started specializing. Production chains crossed borders constantly. A component could be manufactured in Mexico, assembled in the United States, and sold in Canada. And here's something many people don't know. Some products cross the border several times before becoming the final product that reaches consumers. Yes. The same component can travel between countries during different stages of production. That shows just how interconnected these economies became. Over the years, trade grew dramatically. Mexican exports increased tremendously. New investments arrived. Entire industries emerged that depended directly on international trade. Especially sectors such as automotive manufacturing, electronics, and industrial production. But criticism also emerged. Because not every sector benefited equally. And that is where a debate began that continues to this day. A debate about winners, losers, and the true impact of globalization. Now comes the important question. How does all of this affect the average person? Because it's easy to talk about billions of dollars in exports. It's easy to talk about statistics. But most people want to know something much simpler. How does this affect my wallet? Well, it affects it more than you might imagine. When trade flows more easily between countries, many businesses can obtain materials, components, and products at more competitive costs that can help keep the prices of certain goods lower. Think about cars, home appliances, electronic devices, tools, replacement parts, and a huge number of products that are part of everyday life. In addition, millions of jobs in Mexico are directly or indirectly linked to export-related activities, from machine operators to engineers, from truck drivers to port workers. Economic integration created an enormous network. And here's something very interesting. Many people believe that trade agreements only benefit large corporations. But the reality is that when an exporting factory creates jobs, those wages circulate through restaurants, stores, services, and local businesses. The effect spreads throughout the economy. Of course, that doesn't mean everything is perfect.
No economic system is.
But it does mean there is a much deeper connection between international trade and everyday life than most people realize. By the way, if you enjoy these economic topics explained in a simple way, I recommend watching our video about inflation. Because several things we're discussing today connect directly to how prices behave. Now then, as the years went by, new needs began to emerge. The world had changed. The internet transformed business. Technology advanced rapidly. Supply chains became much more complex. And many people believed NAFTA needed an update. That was when new negotiations began. After several years of discussions, USMCA was born, the agreement that currently replaced NAFTA. At its core, it maintains much of the existing economic integration. But it also includes new rules related to labor standards, intellectual property, digital trade, and certain strategic sectors.
Put simply,
it wasn't a complete destruction of the previous agreement. It was more of a modernization, an update adapted to modern times. And here's something interesting. Many people hear about USMCA and think it is something entirely different from NAFTA. But in reality, both agreements share much of the same philosophy. Facilitate regional trade, promote investment, and strengthen economic integration among participating countries. That is why when we talk about USMCA, we are also talking about decades of shared economic history. A history that continues to develop even today. And that is exactly why any comment related to this agreement attracts so much attention from investors and financial markets. Did you know that a single statement can move millions of dollars in just minutes? And no, that's not an exaggeration. This is where the most current part of our story begins. Over the past several years, Donald Trump has made various statements regarding international trade, tariffs, and the future of trade agreements. Some of these statements have created uncertainty in financial markets. And here it's important to understand something. Markets do not react only to completed events. They also react to expectations, to possibilities, to future scenarios. If an investor believes there could be a significant change in trade rules, they may adjust their decisions even before that change actually happens. That means a public statement can influence exchange rates, stocks, bonds, and business expectations. Not because the change already exists, but because the market is trying to get ahead of it. And here we encounter a key word: speculation. Now pay attention. When we talk about speculation, we're not necessarily talking about something negative. We're simply talking about people trying to estimate what might happen in the future. The problem is that the future is never completely guaranteed. That is why markets can react strongly even when no final decisions have been made. And this is where the role of a president becomes so significant. Because regardless of whether a proposal is eventually implemented or not, their words carry weight. A lot of weight. Especially when we are talking about the president of the world's largest economy. Businesses listen. Investors listen. Governments listen. Analysts listen. And everyone begins evaluating possible scenarios. What if certain rules change? What if new tariffs appear? What if some aspects of the agreement are renegotiated? All of those questions immediately start circulating. And while answers do not yet exist, uncertainty appears. Uncertainty is something financial markets generally do not enjoy very much. Because making decisions becomes more difficult when future rules are unclear. That is why we often see volatility following major announcements. Not necessarily because something has already happened, but because there is a possibility that something could happen. And that distinction is crucial for understanding how modern markets work. By the way, if you watched our video about government bonds and treasury investments, you'll remember that expectations play a massive role in finance. Well, something very similar happens here. Expectations can move markets even before actual events occur. Now, let's think about consumers again. Because at the end of the day, everything comes back to ordinary people. If businesses perceive prolonged uncertainty, some investments may be delayed. Some projects may be postponed. Some decisions may be reconsidered. And that can eventually influence employment, production, and economic growth. It doesn't mean it will happen automatically. But it does mean expectations matter. A lot. That is why investors closely follow every comment related to international trade. Because they understand that trade rules affect a huge number of industries. From agriculture to advanced manufacturing. From logistics to technology. Everything is connected. And the more integrated an economy becomes, the more sensitive certain sectors may be to regulatory or commercial changes. That explains why seemingly simple statements can become global financial news. It's not just the content of the words. It's the potential impact they could have if they eventually become actual policy. In the end, the story of NAFTA and the current USMCA is much more than a story about documents signed by politicians. It is a story about factories, about workers, about consumers, about trucks crossing borders, about supply chains connecting thousands of companies, about investments creating jobs, and about how three economies learned to work together for decades. It is also a story about expectations. Because in modern markets, perceptions matter. Statements matter. Signals matter. And people are constantly trying to anticipate what might happen next. That is why when you hear news about international trade, you will no longer see it as something distant. You will understand that it can eventually influence prices, jobs, investments, and economic growth. And that is exactly why understanding these topics is so important. Because the better we understand how the economic world works, the better decisions we can make. If you enjoyed this video, I also recommend watching our episodes about inflation and government bonds. Both help explain many of the forces that drive the modern economy. And if you want to keep discovering how money, history, and the major decisions that shape our world really work, subscribe. Because we still have many fascinating stories left to tell.